Unmute.
Yeah, I came back to Michigan. I was in Chicago for a while, but I'm back here.
Okay.
Good for you. What part of Michigan? Upper north?
All right, y'all, we are now streaming.
Ready, Thomas?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. Welcome back to the fourth day, the second to last day of the 10th annual SISE conference, Sustainable Infrastructure and the Gigaton Challenge. We can see the finish line, and this is what I see on the last and final turn. To all the attendees, all the audience, thank you for joining us on this special journey. To all the speakers so far and the ones today, we're grateful more than you know. To all the fellows, you guys are amazing. The world may be melting, but I'm not panicking. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want to highlight 2 points before I introduce the speakers. First, an administrative task. For some of you, publishing an article is critical for your current or future professional success. The American Energy Society is inviting any fellows who want to publish an article, a simple article, 150 to 250 words, summarizing one speaker's presentation. You'll get full citation, full credit, name, everything. And we'll publish your article in our magazine, Energy Today. If you're interested, please send Katie, a chat right now, just saying if you're at all interested, it's not a commitment, just say, Katie, I'm interested and this is who I'd like to write about. And don't worry about overlap, we can sort that out too. But this is a professional opportunity for any fellow that's interested in publishing an article in Energy Today. My second and final point before I introduce the speakers. The breakout group I attended yesterday had an amazing conversation. Aparna, I don't know if you're here yet. Oh, there you are. Hey, Aparna. Please, if you could help me point out to those that were by chat who were as part of our breakout session. It was an amazing conversation, and I'd like to summarize that for all of you that were not able to attend it. A lot of thought was put into the narrative of this week, a lot of thought. To review, you all started out working on the ecosystem maps. This was a fact-based project, an exercise to think about energy beyond yourself and instead from the perspective of community. Then Monday, all of the speakers went deep into the facts, You may have felt lost at times, that's okay, I did too. But you got something out of it. Most important, a deeper appreciation for the complexity of energy. The lesson that we learned, I think, if I can summarize, there are no easy answers in energy. Then Tuesday, we went deeper into the sector from the perspective of Exelon, as well as the entire Midwest region as a whole through the United Nations. Critical thinking without perspective is a form of ignorance. Wednesday, we had a full day of solutions-oriented conversations on the political and activist side. These conversations meant more because we had all been grounded in fact-based analysis from the days prior. We enjoyed Wednesday a lot, but don't dismiss the work that we all put in before that. And now today, Thursday, how to make a difference, how to change the world as an entrepreneur. Our lead speaker, who will introduce his guest, is Jason Bloomberg, the CEO and Managing Director of Energy Foundry. If you don't yet know Energy Foundry, you should. Based in Chicago, Energy Foundry is not your typical venture capital firm. They offer a full suite of support tailored to the needs of the startup. Their portfolio is both focused and sweeping, all clean tech and low carbon, but they invest in IoT, IIoT, materials, storage, lighting. You get the point. The best way to introduce Jason Bloomberg and Energy Foundry, the American Energy Society named it one of the top energy influencers in the world. Jason will introduce his guests, Francis Wang, the CEO of Nanograph, and they will have a conversation. Take this opportunity to submit questions by chat about the venture you dream of starting. This is an incredible life-changing opportunity. And if you want to keep your questions anonymous, just note it, send it to me privately, send it to Jason privately, and we'll keep your questions private. Maybe you want to stay stealth. But this is a great opportunity. Jason, Francis, thank you for being here. Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you. Questions will pour in and I'll help you along the way. Jason.
Thanks. That was great to hear the overview of what's happened over the ensuing days. Always a tremendous program here. Hats off to Thomas and George for founding this many years ago and creating a great program. We've always been happy to be part of it. And then you folks, Eric and Katie from American Energy Society, just tremendous work. So when I saw that come together, just so excited with the outcome. But thanks for the intro. And a great group here. I assume sometimes we do this in person and get to meet the folks, and always exceptional people that are part of this program. So as a venture firm, but focused on big things that change the world in the environment, sustainability, and clean tech, we're a little different than a lot of folks because we will invest in things very early. What I mean by that is most people that call themselves venture capitalists, they wait and see if it works. And if it works, then they'll put money in our space. There's very few of us who will say somebody has an idea or it's coming out of a lab and we're betting on this revolutionary technology with this great set of people and we are going to have major impact. And so when Eric and George and Thomas and Katie said, hey, could you grab somebody from one of your portfolio companies that's really making a difference? I thought of Francis and the folks from Nanograph and what they're doing. And when we invested in them and they came out of the lab, which was about 6 or 7 years ago, batteries were not cool. Nobody had any inclination that, besides George, any inclination that they would be a big deal in the not too distant future. Argon and George have been instrumental in helping Nanograph's early success and mentoring and working with them some along the way. And so I thought who would be great because as you know, batteries can be and will be a tremendous change to the future of energy. And so Francis, who's the CEO of Nanograph, has many, many years in the battery industry. A senior R&D leader from Duracell, back when they were doing much more creative things than just providing batteries that you throw away and hurt the environment. Took a tour around the globe as a leader in R&D. And then we were lucky to bring him back to join Nanograph a number of years ago when they were still early to lead the R&D efforts and really drive the company to the next level. When the prior CEO was asked to be deputy mayor of Chicago, leading business and a number of other areas, it made perfect sense that Francis would take over for Nanograph and really drive the business to the next level and the technology. They have, and I'll let Francis introduce himself a little bit as well, but they have the world's leading battery technology, about 30 to 40% better than anything else at the market and continuing to stay ahead. They have done it a lot different than most other folks, which you see happen in the battery industry, that somebody has a novel technology. A lot of people get really excited. They put a lot of money in. The business does not achieve its goals. Everybody becomes disillusioned and they blow up the business and it walks away and the technology never even has a chance to meet its expectations. What Nanograph does, and we'll say that this is our playbook because we've stolen it from them or they've stolen it from us, one of the two, but we've worked with them along the way, which is don't take too much venture capital money so the expectations can match the outcomes, and work with industry partners, work with government agencies to fund the business from its infancy till when it's ready for commercialization. So you have plenty of time to develop the business, develop the technology. And if you miss a few milestones, which by the way, these folks haven't, but if they did, they would be able to achieve, you'd still be able to survive because everyone's supporting you and happy with your outcomes. And I can get more into the issues around clean tech and science-based innovation later. so I'll let Francis take over and talk a little bit more about his technology, the business that they're launching. But bar none, this is a tremendous innovation coming to market, having great outcomes. And Francis is the key from first helping drive the technology to really fruition to now leading the business going forward, and the technology with the rest of the team, a tremendous team there working to drive the technology forward.
Thanks, Jason. That was very kind, maybe too kind. It's at the end of the day, it's a team effort. So I want to make that clear. And Eric and everyone else, thank you for the organizers for the opportunity to speak.
I don't want you to say that, Francis, because I don't want anybody to try and hire the rest of the team members, really.
Right, gotcha. Okay, so strategic comments. So I'm Francis Wang. I'm the CEO of Nanograph. As Jason mentioned, we're a local Chicago startup. We started around 2012 as a spin out of Northwestern University. I'm not one of the founders. I actually came later on in 2015. And the company has a really unique story and business plan and customer traction that I'm sure we'll get into later. Jason kind of touched on those, you know, a little bit of the ethos of our company, but we can get into that later. Essentially what we are, just to be more specific, Jason introduced a little bit, we're a negative electrode technology company. So it's a material, we call it in the battery industry, we call it an anode material. And to be more specifically, it's based on silicon, and we have graphene also in the mix. And at the time when they started this company, one of the students, his PhD thesis was partially on graphene. I'll give him a shout out. Carrie Hayner is our CTO and Northwestern PhD material science student, had the initial idea of graphene was just coming on the scene, had not won the Nobel Prize yet. And he started thinking, and his professor and advisor was, you know, can graphene answer and enable any of the technologies that are out there that haven't really been able to make it to market, silicon being one of them. And we can go deeper into that too. But so our company is a silicon anode company. I joined in 2015. We've been making great strides in growing the business. We now have a 10-ton manufacturing facility in Ichihara, Japan, and incredible customer traction. We are getting a lot of kudos for the way that we run the company, but you know, more importantly, we've grown the company on a shoestring budget, and creative. As far as I know, it is the leading silicon anode that is commercially available today. So we've done a lot on very little. That's part of our ethos, and just very happy to talk to all of you.
So it looks like there's a question from Thomas here. So we'll just start with that, and then we can have more of a conversation. But Thomas's question of when is a startup no longer a startup, which is a good question. I think there's phases in the life of a startup. There's pre-commercial, and the pre-commercial stage is when there's the most technology risk. So that means before you have a product to market. And that's broken down into the idea phase coming out of the lab. And then there is the beta. So the first item you have, then the alpha, sorry, the first example of it actually working, the beta, which would be the second example of it working, and then multiple commercial iterations along there. You get to commercial scale, and then you start generating real revenue, or some real revenue. During that phase before, there's limited revenue, but our goal, and Nanograph did this along the way, is get customers to buy some no matter what, because then you get customer feedback, and then it drives that through. Then once you get to commercial scale, then you kind of get to about 5 to 10 million in revenue. And once you get to 5 to 10 million in revenue, you move to kind of growth or early growth equity. And everything changes at that point, because before 5 to 10 million in revenue, everybody thinks it's a science project, and then everybody thinks it's very early. At 5 to 10 million in revenue, all of a sudden, if it looks promising, everybody wants to get in. And that's where most people in our space play from a venture perspective. Most corporations are interested in that. Most other venture firms. And so the valuation, the amount you can raise, everything significantly increases from there.
Do you recommend reverse engineering, setting a target of 5 million and say, how do we get there? Or is that too formulaic?
No, so there's Eric Rise in the startup, I forgot what it's called, but it's well believed the minimum viable product is what you should really be marketing or targeting how much money you need. You really should be looking at minimum viable profitability, or 5 to 10 million, and backing in from that on how much you need, because just getting your product to market and running out of money is a really bad idea, because you can't prove it to anybody.
By the way, Louis had a question for you, Jason. We're going to have, and Francis, both of you should answer it if you don't mind. Louis, do you want to share your question online?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, and thank you so much for your time. What are the best first steps a person or team should take when coming across a good idea? And what are some of the greatest mistakes a young, unexperienced individual or team could make? Thank you.
Francis, why don't you answer that first?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, sure. Maybe this is perhaps 101, but I think when you have a good idea and you're passionate about it and you think that it can provide compelling value to somebody else other than yourself, I think it's really important to vet that idea. So start socializing it, right? With folks that have been there, done that, probably a little bit older than yourselves. I do that myself, honestly. We have things, and Jason's one of our advisors. And when there's critical aspects that are in his sandbox, I will pick up the phone and say, hey, Jason, what do you think? Am I crazy here? So I think that's really the first thing, vet that idea. Does it make sense? Can it survive in the market? And there's a list of different questions. In terms of like the common mistakes, I also think this is definitely an energy type of thing, but what we saw like in the clean tech bust a lot of times is scope. And that's one thing I think Nanograph has done really well. There's a tendency, maybe it's a human tendency, to just go, I'm going to save the world. And, you have these scopes that are just really unrealistic, and, it can just send you down a dark hole. So it's important. Scope is really important, especially in the energy sector, because technology adoption times are so long, right? The chasm is so long, if you use that analogy, that there's so many companies that die in the valley of death just because they weren't focused enough about the problem they were asking, and oftentimes didn't socialize it. And, they just did not know that their customers really didn't care about the solution that they were bringing forth. So that's my answer on that one.
Really good comments. I'll add in, and it's to build on Francis's, that the number one mistake that I see folks make is that they don't understand their industry landscape. So I can see folks that will work on a technology for 5 years thinking it's the best. They don't understand what other startups are doing. They don't understand what corporations are doing. And it's not the best. And so we will often look at 10 of the same thing in a year if it's a hot space. And from a venture perspective, that helps us pick the best one. But on the flip side, some of these folks will come in and say, mine is so much better. Because of confidentiality, would never tell them, no, it's not, and here's why, or look at this other technology. But if they did some work, they could figure that out themselves, because people that are out there raising money or pitching at pinch competitions and so forth, they could figure it out, and they don't do that. And so then what you need to do is look back at your technology and either move the goalpost for yourself, or say, is this not going to be the best or one of the best, and should I not do it? The next piece that layers onto that is yours a cost-effective decision? I often see folks say, my technology business model is 10% better. No one's going to switch for 10% better because there's too much risk involved in switching. They also say mine reduces CO2 or has better environmental impacts, and so folks are going to switch because of that. And as we all know, they don't. As we look at the statistics on that, 80% of people say they will do something better for the environment, 60% say they will pay for it, 20% say they do pay for it, and 3% actually do. And my metric on 3% is how many people sign up for the green energy plan at their home that costs more. And it's about 3% of customers. And so with that, you really can't build a business. And the way that we look at investing to change the world for the environment is find technologies that are significantly better, that can reduce the CO2, the environmental impact, and it's much better, so people just buy it. An example is the LED bulb reduces the energy consumption of a light bulb by 90%. And at this point, it's much better, so it just makes sense for people to buy. And so that's a no-brainer. We look at that every day, that, you know, there's the policy lever and you can twist someone's arm behind their back to make them do something, or you can give them the better choice. You know, do you want the ice cream and it's healthy? And that's what we're looking for with new technologies. So stepping back, same thing. We'll see people working 5-10 years of their life on a technology that's not economically better. They just hope people think it's environmentally better. And it may or may not be, by the way. And they don't, and no one's ever going to buy it, which is unfortunate. And then the last is understanding the financing piece of it. Well, one other thing, how much money do you need? What are the milestones of that? You can figure that out, but that's important to understand. And then making sure you have the right team. As Francis mentioned, the team at Nanograph is a tremendous team, very smart folks that started it. And they've continued to add good people like Francis and others to the team and pulled them in. They have renowned advisors that help them along the way, and that's great as well. And so they've been pulling folks in, and they started with great folks, so that's important as well. You don't have to have the perfect team to start out with. You just have to have some key folks and then know to bring in some other great people and know where your strengths and weaknesses are. So that was a little long-winded of an answer, but
that's okay. That's okay. So it leads into the next question. So we're going to turn to Christina Huang, who has a question, but Giselle's going to pitch something after that. So we're all just holding our breath. Good luck, Giselle. So get ready, Jason. You're going to get a pitch. But Christina,
thank you.
Christina has two questions. Christina, you're getting into the social impact. Jason, that's the second part of her question. The fellows are really into that DBL, TBL, the triple bottom line. They want that social impact. But Christina, go ahead. I love your two-part question.
Yeah, so thanks so much for the comment, and especially very interested in the social impact area and social entrepreneurship. So two questions. The first one being, when making decisions on the VC side on investing in early stage startups, what do you look for? Is it more of a team or more of the idea part? And the second part of the question would be, in terms of social impact ventures in the environmental sector, what are some good strategies to measure the outputs versus outcomes to prove the proposed impact of the venture that we're working on?
Yeah, so I'll take that in two parts. If I forget your second one, I'll ask again. But the first, because there are two questions. The first question is, what do we look for? Bar none, we look for a revolutionary technology or business model. Because what you're doing in our space is you're disrupting an incumbent player. So if I am going to take Schneider Electric and take a billion-dollar business or multi-billion-dollar business and try and kick the table legs out from under it and take its share with a significantly better product, I need to have a technology that's significantly better or business model. The second thing is if I, with the team we build over time and we help supplement that. We need the right people to move it forward, but we work with that. That is a lot different than most other venture funds. Most venture funds focus on the digital space. And those folks, the team is most important. And that makes sense because here's the key difference. When you are doing investing in the general clean tech sustainability space, you are developing a technology that needs to change the market. When you are investing where most people do in digital, you're leveraging someone else's technology. You can go and create a web program or an app in a night. The technology exists. What you are looking for is a business model there that and a customer adoption plan that can work and scale. And so what you have to prove quickly is that your idea works. Now, the reason team's important is because ideas like that aren't that novel. They don't have a lot of IP underneath them. And so you want a team that can quickly execute to capture the opportunity. The reason that venture funds in those spaces say 1 in 10 will be successful is because you invest in 3 of the same thing and you see which one's going to work. And of those 3, the one that works, you put money in and you hope that that one comes through. And between you and a club of people, you've invested in 10 of the same thing. And as 3 of those come to the next level, you invest in that, and then one of them pops out the other end. And it's all about execution because the ideas are similar. And so that's the difference. In our space, the team is important, but if you don't have a game-changing technology, it doesn't move the needle. Francis, I know I covered a lot of ground there. I don't know if you have anything, and I know it was more to me, but anything to add into that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, at least in my experience here, that technology is important, but there's been plenty of days where the technology goes sideways. And if you boil it down, it's the people that are there. I mean, you've got to be resilient, persistent. Things will go sideways with the technology, and there's little pivots in here. But that's the great thing, and kind of the reason why, folks get into this. It's fun, even though those days sometimes, you're looking out into the abyss, but you get together with a great group of people and you figure it out. And that's kind of what we do. And there have definitely been some dark days. The technology's got to be solid, that's for sure, as Jason said. And then, the team is what can change and evolve that technology to meet the changing, factors and characteristics of the market and the customer.
All right, hey, Jason, Francis, should we go to Giselle? Giselle, you get points for just being brave. Is that all right, Jason?
Sure, we're skipping the second question for now. We can always come back.
The social impact, yeah, because we've got a lot of questions coming.
Okay.
Samuel, Karan, I mean, there's some great questions. We'll make sure to get to them.
Okay, great.
Did you say we're coming to me now, Eric?
Yeah, go ahead, Giselle, and then we'll do the social impact later.
Yeah, I was trying to finish typing it up in the chat. Okay, so in a nutshell, I started this project this summer, and I was trying to just find something that I'm passionate about. So it's a drone delivery service. Well, you're all reading it, so I'll just add to the part that's already there. I guess my main concern is the lifeline of the idea. Not that the sanitization mechanism was one of the main aspects that made it stand out, but I wanted to figure out a way to make it last as a drone delivery service overall. Yeah, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this, so I'm still pretty new to this. I'm actually a part of a design fellowship right now, where I really developed the idea, and I just finished the computer-aided design model, and I'm about to post it on a crowdfunding website to start getting those investments to make the first prototype. So yeah,
All right,
kind.
Jason. Giselle, that's okay. Good, good, good. Jason, where should she start? Giselle, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
great job. So from what I understand, and I read it on the side here, there's two parts to it. One is drone delivery, and the other is sanitization of the package. And the sanitization is novel. I haven't heard that before. As you know, drone delivery is one that's more well known out there, is something people are working on. Amazon had patented a hovering drone package and then delivery from the hover space. So it would be, just sitting over a neighborhood and packages would go from there. I believe they did that just to throw people off because that makes literally no sense. George would tell you and Francis that the amount of energy it would take in batteries, which maybe they'd love to see happen, but the amount of batteries energy it would take is wild. So what I foresee in the future of drone deliveries is actually an automated truck that drives through the neighborhoods, and the drone is actually the last 100 feet or 30 feet. It takes it just and drops it on the front stoop or wherever you want it that's secure, and then it goes back. So it's more like a pick effort. And then the other places you have drones would be for a separate would be for HOVs, so taking people places, though that's a little farther. And then lastly, for military operations.
Jason,
so where you then would be playing
should
is,
she target her prototyping to one of those sectors, or should she try to
yeah, so that last 100 feet is probably the way to think about it, because she's looking at the sanitization approach there. And that may be, if you really wanted to hone in, because there are, as you do some work, and Francis knows drones better than I do, because his battery has a lot of places to play there. So I'll let him focus more on the drone aspect, because he knows that way better than I do. I would focus just on the sanitization instrument. And is there a way to integrate that into existing drone delivery? Because there you have a unique value proposition, potentially an IP carve out space, and maybe a more direct focus. And the last thing is, and I'll let Francis talk about the drone space. As you think about it, there are online a number of like standard pitch decks and pitch lines. And so when you're doing a pitch, there's usually, I am pitching X because I'm solving X problem, which leads to X and big of opportunity. And so it's kind of the one line elevator pitch that you are trying to get people excited. And so a lot of folks will gravitate to that when they're trying to sell it and use that over and over. So look at some of that material as well as you go to Kickstarter or whatever you're going to do, and that'll be helpful to bring it forward. But the landscape analysis, I think, also is an important piece of it. Francis, anything you want to add? Because you're really the drone expert much more than I am.
Yeah, just a couple comments, not from the business side, but the technical. So we do work on drones. We work with the top 2 drone manufacturers, and then we also do some stuff with the government as well. The big thing that you'll have to consider in your business model is the limitation. Of course, as you can imagine, if we're involved, it has to do with the battery. And so drones, the unfortunate part of drones is they work, but they only work for about 25 minutes or so. And the big drone companies like DJI and Parrot are desperate for more flight time. So the limitation there, it's not what they can do. Now, I think they get what they can do, right? And they're beginning to do these things and these applications that all exist. The limitation is getting enough power and getting enough energy. So these drones, because of the propellers, it's a lot of power, and it's a special type of battery. And in our space, not to get too deep into this, but there's always a trade-off between power and energy. So you can have an energy type cell and the thing will run longer, which is more like a cell phone, so to speak. But then you have the drones on the other side that you really have to have a power type battery. And then you know, you need to compensate with the energy for power. And so that's, you know, when you think about what a drone can do and maybe frame up your business, think very carefully about, you know, the reality of where it is today and also the reality of where it will be tomorrow. I mean, getting 5 more minutes on a drone is, for the battery guys, for us, is a big deal. And you know, I'm sure there's some services and applications that you're still out of reach at that point. So that is one of the limitations of drones. It certainly is the energy storage part of it.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate your input. Thank you so much. And I'll definitely
Thanks for pitching the great idea.
Yeah, Giselle, well done. By the way, so Francis, we've got a question come from Samuel. Karan, get ready, but Samuel actually knows you, Francis. So
yeah, hi Sam.
Francis.
How's your arm?
Pretty good.
Was it your arm or your knee? I forget. There was some sort of skateboarding accident, if I remember, but okay. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. My question is basically just about the future goals of Nanograph as a business, because a lot of startups, you know, have the goal of building up the company quick and selling it fast to some larger company. So I was wondering if Nanograph is looking to you know, at this point, at 8 years old of a company, sell to like LG Chem, big battery manufacturer, or build up the business independently and yeah, with private investors, or maybe even go public.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something we think a lot about today. So I'll say at the beginning, and the, you know, the founders and the board had agreed that, you know, our strategy was to take the company to a certain point, right? To get through a lot of what Jason had talked about, like a high fidelity MVP, and prove this out, and also show that you could scale this thing to a point. But the reality is with battery materials companies is that, you know, there's a lot of unsuccessful ones. And in fact, I think it's pretty hard to pick out successful ones, right? And being able to get to the market. We always realized that once you did get it to that point, right? And if you could achieve a design win, you know, you really start thinking about going from 10 tons per year to, you know, thousands or 10,000s of tons per year. That also requires, you know, other aspects that, you know, Nanograph isn't really equipped to deal with, like, for example, having a sales force, having the network and relationships with battery manufacturers. So we always realized that we wanted to take the company to a point in a very lean way. And once we did that, to make that either form a strategic partner, which in some cases that's what we've done. And another way of saying that is to create some sort of exit for investors and the people that we are here. Yeah, does that help?
And
Jason,
I'll add to that. This is a broader
sure.
philosophical question on a global scale, which probably George has more thoughts on this, because in some countries, the government will subsidize that scaling effort to a sizable extent. And in others, they will have private companies that are large, that they have helped build, that will pay for that scaling effort. So for US battery companies, it is much more challenging in that early scaling to find the right capital at the right price that competes. And so on a macro level, this is a question for the US government of, do they want to be in the battery business in the US in a sizable way? And if they do, we need more public money to support that, to compete at the global scale. And if they don't, you know, then it's a little more challenging to take it and build it here without finding the right partners. Nanograph has done a great job at balancing it, finding a Japanese partner so far that will invest in the company with resources and manufacturing that helps build it here. But it is a good inflection point question that we will play out with Nanograph, and then we will play out with other successful innovations, and particularly in the battery space that we'll see in the future of is a sale, is go public, and it all depends on whether there's capital to do those things in the US.
Hey, Eric, and
yeah, George, I was going to ask you, You have to have a comment, George.
I do have a comment, and I think Jason is right on it, Francis. Here's the comment. If you look nationally, look globally at which nations have taken the lead in the battery business, and I'm really talking about batteries here. When it was personal electronics, it was Japan and South Korea for sure. Then China, about 10 years ago, maybe 12, decided that was strategically important. They may have had electric vehicles in mind at that time or not, we don't know. But they began to make moves which established them in the battery business. What moves did they make? Well, they had plenty of government support, and in China, as everyone knows, with their system of governments, they can make a decision and do it. It doesn't have to be passed into law, so to speak. It doesn't have to have lots of popular support. So they made the decision to support the battery business. And they made another decision. They said, let's secure our supply chain, because for especially lithium-ion batteries, the supply chain comes from all over the world. And we heard this already in SISE this week, Congo for cobalt, but look at everything. None of it is basically owned. Well, I shouldn't say, there's no country that owns all of it. And so they very strategically made deals and bought, for example, mines in other countries to guarantee their supply chain.
George, is that the Belt and Road Initiative?
It's definitely the Belt and Road Initiative. And it's a fascinating study. People at Harvard have written scholarly papers on it that are actually fun to read. But that's what it is. Then I think others realized quickly. So Europe and the US are the other two regions and countries that should be thinking about this. Europe got the message pretty fast. And about 2 years ago, they started to consolidate the battery business in Europe. And they did not want to have Chinese gigafactories built in Europe. They wanted to build their own gigafactories in Europe. The first one is going to come on in 2021. It's been in progress for several years. It's going to come on in Norway. It's going to be powered exclusively by renewable energy, so wind and hydro, and a little bit of sun. So there's no carbon emissions associated with it. And they've already sold to automakers in Europe their first year or year and a half of output. So they also were quite deliberate about this and quite strategic. They enlisted in the European Union, which has a bent to go to the future in clean energy, a bit more than the United States does. And they're well on their way. The United States has one notable company in this space, and that's Tesla. They've played by US rules, which are not a lot of federal support for the battery business. They've been very competitive. Their output is as big as any of the Chinese gigafactories, many gigafactories in China. And of course, the total is much bigger than Tesla. But Tesla competes with the best Chinese companies. And I think that is sort of an example that the US can do it, even with the rules we have now. You may be aware that DOE announced the Energy Storage Grant Challenge in January, and it's taking shape now. But its clear objectives are to have a battery business and a supply chain, a secure supply chain in the United States that leads the industry. Now, whether we can achieve that or not remains to be seen, but the goal has been formulated. So I think there are a lot of lessons here. And I think Jason and Francis may agree with this, that it's good to go, if you're a startup, it's good to go in the areas where there's already some popular and federal support for doing it, because it's going to be a tough road. And let's see what happens in the battery business, but it's a very interesting time.
The
Yeah,
one
it really
addition
is.
I'd have to what George said is, you know, in the US, we have the best innovation in the world. And George is a key piece of that. So you guys are lucky to have him involved. But, you know, we are miles ahead in innovation, and we are along all the clean tech spectrums. The rest of the world comes here to see what we're doing and try and work with us. But batteries in particular, very strong. The key question is do we want to, as a country, be the leader, not in innovation, but in the industry going forward. You know, we as a venture fund would be happy to work with government, and we do on the innovation side. We'd be happy to continue to work with them on commercialization. There just hasn't been as much support in that area thus far. And hopefully that will change as people continue to realize that this is important.
Francis, do you have a comment, or should we move on to a question? What do you want to do?
Yeah, a quick one. I agree with everything George said, and I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm inspired by the news that I see, you know, this week. Not to turn it political or anything, but they're talking about, you know, putting $3 trillion over the course of 4 years to clean energy and energy, right? And the grand energy challenge, I think, is part of that. I'm interested because I know, having worked and lived in China, how, in a sense, it's not an open market and it's not a free market. The government does push technologies and companies one way or the other and does give them a leg up. And I wonder how that's going to play out in the US, because I do see other companies, foreign companies, like, for example, SK's, it's been in the news, and it's billions of dollars in Georgia. I think they're setting up battery factories there. And to what extent the US government will support and encourage homegrown technologies to get into homegrown US batteries will be really interesting to see how they do that. I assume it's not going to be a free market, but it'll be interesting times.
All right. Thank you. So, Corinne, thank you for your patience. Corinne, you had some great questions. We have Corinne coming. We have some questions coming from Twitter. Claudia, be ready. We want to get back to that social impact question. So, Corinne, we'll start with you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for the talk so far. My question relates a little bit to the philosophical discussion you were having with previous questions on how the government supports startup ventures. And my question was, like, earlier at the very beginning of the presentation, you talked a little bit about minimizing the amount a tech startup relies on venture capital because it has more short-term goals, and shifting to partnering with industry and government actors. How do you structure these partnerships differently than a startup's relationship with venture capitalists? I understand Nanograph has a Japanese industrial partner, and I guess some government partners. And are the incentives offered to industry and government partners different?
So I'll let Francis talk about structuring some. I seem to answer these questions first from a broad perspective. But so first, you know, when you're looking at working with government or companies, you need to have the best technology. So, you know, generally they'll have open calls and they'll want to fund the best things to help move them along to plug a market gap where the market doesn't clear. You know, where government plays well, and this is a huge philosophical discussion of where that line should be, but it plays in developing innovation where the market won't develop it itself. The research institutions in the US are a testament to that and the great stuff that comes out of it. Then the question is, well, what's the line of where the market won't play? And I think people believe that corporations will play earlier than they will. That being said, if there is support from venture folks, private capital like us, if there's support from government, then there also becomes support from corporations to see if they can work with the business and technology. So it's kind of a three-legged stool that needs to come together. And the only way it comes together is if the technology clears as being truly one of the best out there and worth putting resources towards. And I believe that's best. You know, nepotism or favoritism is not going to get you successful outcomes, but clearing, because all these pieces of the stool come together because you have the best is proven to work in the US, and I believe will continue and globally, and will continue to work going forward. So Nanograph is an example of what I think is the best, and some people would say one of the best. Well, probably they would say it's the best right now. So I'll let Francis talk a little bit about how that works, that whole balancing act, because it is a lot to manage.
Yeah, and by the way, it is the best. Joke. Yeah, so Nanograph, just a little history on us. We keep saying this, a bulk, I don't know what the numbers clocked at, maybe 70-75% of the money that we've raised has all been non-dilutive funding, right? So the government's played a big role in that, and we have been able to nail big contracts like the USABC. We're the only US silicon anode company that's been given that grant, and that's in the news. So that's been a total of something like $11 million. That has been huge in terms of making all the difference with us.
And that's a partnership with the big three automakers.
Exactly. Right. And this is that's actually at least on paper, a good example of where the government and private industry have gotten together, and the USABC, US CAR do a great job of supporting companies like us, which have neat technology, getting us in front of the customers so we really understand what the pain points are, and then providing the funding to make sure that we get there. So all of those pieces have been incredibly helpful. And Jason's right, you get to a certain point, and I think and we've run into this issue as well, is, okay, so now you've got the best technology, you've proven it, you've gotten the high fidelity MVP. And unfortunately, that market is out in Asia for us. The gatekeepers for us, by and large, are out there. And so, it gets into a weird area. And the folks that would be the best strategic partners, unfortunately, are also out there. And I think we've even experienced that in our company as well, of, there's a good list and a bad list of countries and people that, I think the US government does have feelings about. I mean, we're completely neutral in that. It's just however best in terms of the business that we can get our technology to market quickly. That's the way we look at it. But I can imagine that the early stage funding, these are open questions, and how do you deal with that, I think, are problems that still remain. Right.
And I would add that, and not to say that it only needs to be a U.S. centric effort. Some of the partners in those countries, the folks from Nanograph and our other companies have had some pretty good experiences with a number of countries, and it's been a good partnership. I mean, global supply chains exist because there are good ways for companies and countries to work together. Nanograph is a testament to their partnership with an entity, and Francis can list the name if he wants, but of how well that's gone and how good of a partnership it's been.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit more detail. So back in 2018, we had started, I think, in 2017 with a company called JNC, and this is a specialty chemicals company in Japan. And we started with a JDA, which was kind of, maybe just a dating kind of scenario where we got to know each other. They funded research or development of a product, and we worked really well together. And what we decided in 2018 was to bring them on board as investors and let them do what they do best. And we recognized long ago that, a bunch of PhD students out of Northwestern, what we do best is the innovation portion of it. When it comes to supply chain, quality, all manufacturing and scale, that's not something that, neither our educational backgrounds or also logistics make a ton of sense. So when we brought them on, they became our production partner, and that's been incredibly helpful in getting us to the next stage and creating, traction with customers. That's, they've really, in many sense, made us legit. They've been able to create a an optimized product that we can sell on the market. So that's been huge. And so that's a good example of how, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to be the US. There certainly can be partners. And in fact, most of our partners are abroad. You know, there's obviously a lot of challenges with cultural differences and things like that. But at the end of the day, we found that companies like JNC have been great for us. And, you know, we've been able to get over the any kind of cultural differences or language barriers that exist.
So we're going to, I'm sorry to jump in, we've got a lot of questions, so I'm going to keep going. By the way, Claudia, we're going to get to yours. Shana, we're going to get to yours. We have a question, some questions coming in on Twitter. I just want to jump, I'm sorry, I just want to ask because we have a lot that have come in that way. Jason, I think this one's directed to Jason, but Francis, be ready because you may disagree, and we love that back and forth too. Jason, can you elaborate further on the transition from an innovation to a commercial market? By the way, this question comes in from Virginia. Can you elaborate further on the transition from innovation to commercial market? Is it better to have a few paying customers as evidence, or evidence of mass adoption, such as indicators that suggest? So is it better to have actual paying a few, or tangible evidence of a mass adoption?
Well, I think everybody thinks their technology is going to have mass adoption. I've never met an entrepreneur who doesn't think that. Evidence is a secondary question, but the key piece is you could believe, you might like grapefruit juice, and you think everybody in the world likes grapefruit juice. But when you go out there, you find that a lot of people think that it's too bitter and they don't drink it. Or maybe let's take it one step further. Maybe you like eating raw garlic and most people don't find that so great. But until you go and you try and sell people your raw garlic and see who's eating it from your fruit stand, you'll find that a lot less people want it than you thought to eat. And so then you may take that garlic and say, well, what if I put it in a herbal medicine or in a shake and mix it with other things and it becomes a health drink? And you're like, oh, okay, people want this garlic in the health drink. They just won't chew it themselves. And so you need to get out there and see if people will buy some of your stuff. And again, Nanographs is a great example of this. They started selling material very early. And their customers gave them a lot of feedback that then led to their JDAs and partnerships with some of them because they tried it. And so they worked with them along the way. So getting some revenue to prove really whether people want to eat your raw garlic is something you'd want to know right away. Francis, anything else there?
Yeah, just that's totally right. Speed is key, and you know Jason had mentioned the Eric Ries book, and that's, you know, part of that cycle of feedback, right? Early and often, right? Get their feedback because there's going to be things that you'll need to fix or pivot on in your in your product. The other thing I'd add to what Jason said was, you know, this has just been, you need to make sure that the people that are testing your garlic have some skin in the game. So when we sample to anyone, no matter how big they are, we ask for them to pay for it. It's usually not a lot, but we make sure that they have skin in the game. And when I joined the company, that was a little bit of a foreign concept to me, but you know, I've seen it work tried and true. Sometimes you might get an initial reaction, especially from the big guys, of who do you think you are? But getting them to pay for your sample and making sure that they give you feedback on it quickly is key. And we found that and even if it's a big guy, if they're not paying for the sample, we don't send it because it means they're not serious and it's a waste of our time. So that's the only thing that I'd add to that.
I think that's the most important point you just added that I missed. Make sure they pay for it because then they have to prove they want it. They might be just a small amount, but they've got to go to somebody to get authorization, which means they're much more invested.
Okay, good. So get the money, show me the money. All right, so Claudia, we're going to go to you. By the way, we've got Jay has a question. Sephir's got a question, but let's go Claudia, then Shana.
Okay. So Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Jason. So my question is, I would like to know your thoughts on the key factors to call the attention of angel investors while presenting your idea, and also what is the time frame to consider and move on into a new idea? Thanks.
Jason, that's you, I think.
Yeah, so we look at 850 ideas a year, 800 ideas, and invest in 4 to 6. So as you can see, that's a very tight funnel. So what do you want to do? It goes back to what I said to start with. You need something that's significantly better than the market has today. Then the question is how early is the innovation? What I mean is how risky is the technology or business model? The more risky it is, the bigger the opportunity needs to be. So if it's going to take 5 years to come to market, a lot of things can happen in the next 5 years. And so it needs to be significantly better. If it's going to take 1 year to come to market, then you have, it doesn't need to be as big of an opportunity because the market clears there, because you can make money there. So that's the number one thing. And then back to what I said to start with, you need to understand how unique it is and how novel the opportunity is and be able to present that. And then the next thing, if you're pitching angels, you want to show them that it's a big opportunity, no matter what. So novel technology, big opportunity, and then the right team. And you want to be concise. So you want to spend a little time up front, making sure you have your pitch down before you pitch them. Because if you do hear 850 ideas a year, you're not going to spend 3 hours trying to understand why yours is so special, unless it's a friend of a friend and you're doing them a favor, helping them get feedback.
Or a SISE fellow.
Or a SISE fellow. Sure, yeah, happy. That's a friend of a friend.
There you go, Giselle. Shayna?
Yeah, thank you both. So my question kind of touches on a theme that we've been talking about this week, and that is the evolutionary versus revolutionary innovation. And I was just wondering if you have found that there's been a difference in like ideas and preferences around that in your industry, and then what about the community that may not be as well informed on what you do?
Hey, Shayna, can I piggyback on this one? Because that's a great question. Bill Gates' breakthrough, his venture, he says clean tech, it's just a longer runway. And so, he's looking for revolutionary, but it's not well suited for venture. Shayna's question really digs into some complex issues from your perspective. And Francis, you've found a way to solve it with a different sort of approach, but good, Jason and Francis.
Actually, I'll let Francis answer this first, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, I apologize. I haven't heard all the evolutionary versus revolutionary comments before. I'll just give you my view of what I see in the industry. So, companies like ours, I'd probably put us in the evolutionary category, but on one side, in the sense that, I understood when joining this company that, Silicon's time was here, right? There were a lot of indicators on this, and I've been in the industry for a long time. But as I said in the beginning, the technology adoption, at least in batteries, can be decades, right? History says anywhere from 10 to 20 decades before your idea actually gets into a product in the battery space. And that's a pretty long time especially for investors to wait. We see, my stance on, the revolutionary types of stuff. So we see lots of hype around solid state batteries, lithium metal, and before that, lithium air. I'll be real honest, those, the chasm there is really long and the technical risk is huge. And I think, especially what's happened over the last decade in clean tech, I think getting money for some of these things, even though people do it, I don't know, it's questionable. I'll kind of leave it at that.
So adding on to that, good points, Francis. So, when I look at innovation, to me, it's the confluence of knowledge and point in time. And what we see is a lot of people have the same knowledge at the same point in time, which is why we'll see 10 or 12 of the same thing. So it could be revolutionary, but it's still somewhat evolutionary a lot of the time. And so that's why over time you've seen cross-disciplinary initiatives come together in research, because then you can combine different schools of thought to try and have significantly better outcomes. So there are revolutionary ideas. I think, in the energy space, people are looking for the Iron Man core that could power the whole country from one spot. And everybody hopes that I find that, but I don't. I find, small things that are still huge. I mean, the energy industry is a $6 trillion industry, bigger than, most countries' GDP combined. And so to disrupt that, you can disrupt $100 billion, area with a revolutionary idea, but it doesn't disrupt all of energy. It just disrupts a large piece of it. I mean, even solar or wind are very small in the energy total ecosystem these days, even though they take up a lot of mind share. So I think stepping back, you need to look, is your technology revolutionary and is it a big deal? And if not, or your business model, if not, you should look at something else. Don't waste your time on it, and keep digging through it. And, Argonne and J. Caesar have a bunch of potentially revolutionary technologies. Work with those instead of the idea that you have in a dorm room or in your house in an area where you don't have much experience in. Or take yours and test it against the best that's out there. So that adds to the breakthrough question, which Eric, you brought up. And, I think it's a very interesting question. The folks in our space have not been able to, in general, make money in the venture stage for doing this. And most people say, I wouldn't do your job. You can't do it. You can do it. You just have to be pragmatic and thoughtful about how do you fund a very hard science business, and how do you work with with companies and government agencies to help bring it to market, and how do you have the best opportunity that's out there. The way that venture traditionally works, of piling money into a good idea and hoping in the other end something magnificent comes out, doesn't work in our space, and it proves to blow it up, because a startup will say, I can triple the potential of this battery. And here's the milestones. I will do 20% one year, 20% the next year, and 20% the third year. I'll keep growing like that. And when they get 0% in the second year of movement, everyone loses hope and walks away. And so what we want to do is make it a more sustainable financial runway and expectations for the technology, that at the other end, everyone turns their head and says, whoa, that's a big deal. And so you just need to build it and fund it accordingly, and manage expectations. And then the last thing is, with Breakthrough, they're putting a lot of money out there, and their goal is to fund successful outcomes. I think with them, they're still early, and the question becomes the business models and technologies they're funding. Will they do that? And we'll see. They have a lot of smart people there, come from smart areas. But I think, in our view, measured financing of a startup with realistic goals is proving, that was our philosophy originally, and it's proving that you can have success that way. You just have to have areas that you can target to do that. But everything needs to be a little revolutionary, because, as I said, you're one of the 800 or 750 we don't fund if you're just taking the common knowledge and going one step further.
Okay. Thank you, Jason and Francis. So we're going to have probably time for two questions. One is going to come from Seb. It's a great question. And then we're going to have to wrap up. Jay, we're going to go to you because you have a question that kind of brings in a lot of heavy issues, and it's a great way to segue into the next session too. Jay, though, I am going to ask you to really summarize it almost like an elevator pitch, but an elevator question. But Sep, let's go to you because I think I really want to get yours in there. And then Jay, your elevator question.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys being here today with us. So the question I have for you is like, we have this big supply chain problem currently in the world, and on the other hand, we have this big goal of being like a global sustainability by 2050. So the question I have is like, is there any way that you guys see any way that all the startups, regarding of their size, big or small, can somehow contribute to that goal?
So, you know, so people, there's two different questions on this. Do people want to reduce their standard of living, or do we look at technology to do this? And, you know, I think most policy orientation is around existing technologies. And what you're saying is, how do we achieve that? So most people don't want to reduce their standard of living. It's proven that hasn't worked, and I've given some stats on people's willingness to pay. The next question is, how do we do it? And everybody's looking at existing technologies, and that's not going to solve it. So when this proposal might come out from Biden or, you know, existing folks from the current administration, a lot of it is, how do we do wind and solar more? And that's not going to solve it. So what we need to do is focus on all these smaller innovations and help drive those to market. And we've got a shot. We've got a shot. We got a lot of smart people working on it. We've got a lot of good technologies. You know, examples in the battery industry we have here between Francis's leading technology coming to market and George's work across the spectrum in tremendous technologies coming to market, and many others out there. But I think what we need is more support. And I'm playing my own book a little bit here, you know, so more support for money in my pocket to put into entrepreneurs and for others like me to put into entrepreneurs. And then the next stage of folks after that to bring through. And we've got a shot if we can bring all these ideas really to market. But we need to do more than wind and solar to get there.
Thank you. Hey, Francis, I'm so sorry. Jason, I'm so sorry. We're going to do one more and then we're going to break it. I just want to, Jay, you want to do your elevator question?
Yeah, I'm really happy to. I appreciate both of you making some time to talk to us. The question that we've been having in the chat comes down to really nationalism and trade policy. We've been talking about free markets and whatnot, and the question we're having is, if innovation is the goal to solve the Gigaton Challenge, why does it matter what country is funding what, as long as the cheapest product comes to market to decarbonize as fast as possible?
Is that a George question?
Sorry, guys.
See, it seems pretty political. I don't know.
Well, I'll make a comment. Can I make a comment, Eric? It's not political at all.
Sure, and I'm going to take a stab at this, and I'll let you guys. I'm going to put myself out there. Can I?
Sure, and this will be brief. So it's clear, and I like what Jason said, wind and solar are not enough. Clearly not. You need a lot more. And I will give you just one example of a new innovation that might actually work. There's a need for long duration discharge storage, because we've talked earlier, you can have 4 or 5 days in a row of cloudy weather. And what if you're relying on solar? Where are you going to get 200 hours of discharge? Lithium ion batteries won't do it. They'll do 4 hours. So J. Caesar spun out a startup 3 years ago called Form Energy. They just signed in May a contract with, in Minnesota, a utility called Great River Energy. It's the second largest utility in Minnesota, to install a battery. And listen to these numbers. It's 1 megawatt hour of power, but it's 1 megawatt of power, get the units right, 1 megawatt of power, 150 megawatt hours of discharge at full capacity. So full capacity for 150 hours versus lithium ion, which might give you 4 hours. It may not work. It's a test, but that's, as Jason and Francis were saying, a significant innovation over what's available right now, and has the possibility that it might be able to solve that, last 20% of wind and solar. You got to back it up with something. So there is hope.
Eric, before you comment, I have one thought. Just plays into some of the stuff I've said before, which is this comes into a question of incentives. The U.S. has traditionally funded a lot of the leading thinking and research in this space, and in recent times has not commercialized it. That's been commercialized by the rest of the world, and the rest of the world has had an advantage by leveraging that research. If we don't drive U.S. policy to commercialization, there will be less support for new innovation at the earliest stages in this country. And since we have the infrastructure built to do it, and the people here to do it, and the attraction on a global scale for people to work on it, we will lose that, not just technical innovation for the US, but technical innovation for the globe that drives the outcome here. And so the whole industry and solution potential set will fall down. Other countries may pick up some of the innovation piece, but because the infrastructure is so far behind in a lot of those countries, we just won't have it. And so we'll have an industry or a solution set that shrinks significantly. So we do need to prove successful outcomes in the US. And we also need the rest of the globe to do some more early stage innovation and pull that through themselves. Some do, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it only happens here, but some do. And those combined will help solve this challenge together.
That was, thank you, Francis. Thank you, Jason. We're gonna wrap. I think that give everybody a chance to settle in. We're going to continue many of these conversations. You've given us a lot to think about, Jason, Francis. Francis, I know you're heading a ship. I wish you all the best. We're going to be watching you. Thank you for your time. I know this is valuable time. The ship could be steering wayward, who knows? So thank you for your time, truly. Jason, thank you. That was, we covered a lot. Truly, I know for George and Thomas, we're very, very grateful. Fellows, great questions. Let's keep this conversation going. Anybody want to add anything? George, do you want to add anything?
No, just exactly my feelings. Wonderful session. Thank you guys so much, fellows, and Jason and Francis.
Thank you for the opportunity. Look forward to interacting with folks from the group in the future, from the SISE fellows, and thank you.
And watch Giselle's startup.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And all the other fellows, be ready to pitch. Okay.
That's great.
I don't know the